one of the tenets of clinical therapy, including psychiatry in its, say, non-medical forms, is that dialogue is curative. That's actually the fundamental proposition. And the thing about having someone in therapy is, they're often, like everyone, bent, out of shape quite badly, sometimes homicidal, sometimes homicidal's good enough, and hurt and vengeful and and for good reason often. No joke, good reason. If you were in their shoes, you'd feel the same way in all probability. You have to let those people talk. You have to let them talk. They don't even know what they think until they talk. You think, and then you talk. It's like, no, you don't. Most people can't think at all, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. It's very, very difficult to learn to think, because to think, you have to hold an argument between two opposing positions in your own head. You have to delineate both positions, and you have to make, not a straw man out of either. You want to make, in Sam Harris's term, an Iron Man out of both, and then you have to do that alone. It's like, yeah, maybe you can do that if you're Dostoevsky, but because he's the only person I've seen who's really managed that consistently. But to expect anything other than an unbelievably well-trained mind to even step into that territory is naive beyond belief. Almost everyone thinks by talking. They don't even know what they think until they speak. And so often, if you let people speak, they'll speak and they'll say, and then they become aware of some internal contradictions, or maybe they shock themselves. That happens a lot. It's like, oh, I can't believe I said that. And they hear what they have to say. They reveal themselves to themselves. Geez, that just enough right there is often enough to change them. But even if it isn't, let's say they're particularly intransigent, and we're not debating about whether hate speech exists, because bloody well right, it exists, and it can be unbelievably pathological, and I think I'm actually quite familiar with that sort of thing. But you want that out in the air so that people can hear it. You want to drive the people who hate underground? We know what happens psychologically when you do that. It's a very bad idea. Anything you drive underground thrives. It thrives. And it partly thrives because it isn't even allowed to express itself, and then it festers and turns into hatred that far exceeds the original. And the idea that you make society safe by not letting horrible people say terrible things is it's not a good proposition. You want those people out in the open where they can say what they have to say. First of all, so they can see what they're like. Second of all, so that they can see how people respond, because you don't even know what you should think in some sense until you watch how people respond. Well, I won't go on and on about that, but and then the question, there's other questions. Who defines hate? Geez, that's a deadly one. It's like, it's great if you're on the left and the left is in power, because the left defines hate, but they're not going to be in power forever, man. And as soon as the people who are on the opposite side come into power, they're going to use whatever arguments you had and their own, and whatever you think is going to be hate speech, like right now. So you should always, and this is what the founders of the American Constitution did, they always thought, okay, how could an absolute malevolent fool screw this up? They never thought, well, how can we establish the utopia? So that's what you're always thinking when you're putting a limit on something, including someone else's speech. It's like, okay, how could the most malevolent fool imaginable screw this up the worst possible way? And then presume that will happen. And then take steps so that that isn't how it turns out. So you ought to let the people who have horrifying viewpoints express them, subject to these limitations, because you want to make them into martyrs. That's what happened with I can't say it properly, Geert Wilders.
Keatsra.
No, the Dutch guy.
Yeah, the Dutch, who's leading the polls, by the way, and who has a pretty decent chance of winning the election. They nailed him for hate speech, and his popularity went up like 4%. It's like, doesn't seem like a very smart move to me, but I'm sure he's not too unhappy about it. And it might be that the fate of the EU rests on his shoulders. Maybe not. Maybe it's Marine Le Pen.
In the center of that?
So let me tell you about an experiment. So, people think they think, which we've already gone through, and they do that only to a limited degree, because thinking is hard, and mostly we do that by talking. But people also think they know what they're talking about when they say something, and generally they don't. And I'm not being cruel about this. Like, imagine I asked one of you to come up and draw a helicopter on the board. It's like, you're going to draw like a the helicopter a 5-year-old draws. It's going to be like a box with a beanie on top of it with a stick out the end. It's like helicopters. Like, no, that's not a helicopter. It's not even close. Like, what you don't know about helicopters is like would fill many volumes, right? But your knowledge is sufficient to communicate kind of an abstracted representation. And a lot of your thought is actually like that. You don't know as much as you think you know. And that means you're more vulnerable in many ways than you think. And so here's an example. Let's say I bring you into the lab and I get you to fill out a political attitudes questionnaire and I localize you, say, halfway between center and radical left, something like that. Maybe an NDP territory or something like that. And then I ask you to write a 500-word essay about why corporations are a blessing. Okay, I know, so you don't agree with it. Yeah, I know you don't agree with it. But like, try to write a decent essay. If you write a good one, I'll give you like an extra $10 or something, whatever, $50, whatever. So you write out this essay and it's contrary to your viewpoint, and I bring you back the next week and I give you the same political attitudes questionnaire. Well, what do you think happens? You've moved substantially towards the right. And so if I regulate what you have to say, I regulate what you think. And you might think, no, but you're wrong. Because what you think, what you say, especially if you do it habitually, determines what you think. And I'm not willing to cede that to the state, but not only because I object especially to this particular philosophical embedding of this particular statute, say, but also because, you see, your stupid opinion is the corrective for the state's stupid opinions. Like, we're just swamped in ignorance and stupidity. It's a human condition. And states are horrible, tyrannical messes. And individuals are like corrupt and blind. And so it's amazing we can stumble around in the world at all. But what you hope is that now and then some dingbat utters something vaguely sensible that helps curb the tyranny of the state. And you're going to have to let a lot of stupidity be aired before any pearls of wisdom emerge to the surface. So you have to let people stumble around like prejudiced morons, because that's what they are. But hopefully as they stumble and listen, they can become a little less appalling, and so can the state. And that's no utopian vision, I can tell you, that's for sure, but I've never seen a utopian state, and I've certainly never seen a perfect person, so it seems perfectly reasonable to me to phrase it in exactly that manner. Don't let people inside your head. It isn't obvious that they know what they're doing. So.
Over here.